Hey guys, it's Bill from BlenderBrit. Today we're going to be creating this barrel scene using Blender and Substance Painter. Now I've done a Substance Painter tutorial before, but it was quite basic, didn't really cover a huge amount, whereas today we're going to be starting from scratch with an empty scene and going through the entire process of modeling, lighting, texturing in Substance Painter, the materials then in cycles, rendering, and a bit of compositing. So it should be pretty fun, so let's get started. Okay, so here we have our empty Blender scene. I'm going to start by removing the cube and that light, and let's move this camera over to layer 10. There we go. So let's start by pressing Shift A and adding in a circle. Let's bring up the little panel here and change the amount of vertices to 16. That's more than enough for what we're using it for. And now size wise, a barrel is apparently 0.61 centimeters across the diameter and 0.88 high. That's the sort of standard height. So that's why we're using those numbers there. And just apply that scale. There we go. Tab into edit mode and then extrude up the z-axis by 0.88, and we should have the perfect outline of a barrel size. Perfect. Okay, I'm just gonna flip those normals because they are pointing in the wrong direction. There we go. Now you probably seen a tutorial involving red barrels before. That's exactly why I chose it. One of the first scenes I ever did in Blender was Andrew Price's, I think it was on environmental lighting, a scene involving some red barrels. And I was sitting trying to think of a nice simple scene that's easy to create but would also create some nice results from Substance Painter. And I thought, why not go back to good old red barrels, which is why we're here. So once you're in this view, hit Control R to add in a loop cut. Use the mouse wheel to scroll up the amount of cuts. In this case we just want 2, and that will give us our 4 lines across like so. And then within each one of these areas we're going to hit Control R, add in another 2 loop cuts, and now hit Scale Z, about 2.8 I think. Yeah, that'd be nice. So Control R, 2 loop cuts, scale across the z-axis of 2.8, and then once more, bam. Okay, starting to get the sort of shape that we're after. Now what we're going to do is hold down Alt and Shift and select the top edge loop, the middle one from these 2 sections, and then the bottom. Now if you hit Scale and Shift Z, it won't scale across the z-axis, which is what we want in this case. And this will allow us to bring out these little bits like so. Now at this stage we'll add on a subsurf to see what's going on there. Yeah, okay, so you see we've got these kind of curves on these sections here. We want that to be more of a straight line, so we'll add in some more loops. You could do it, in fact I did on my one, I did it via the, what's it called, the mean creases, but I ran into a few issues and ended up having to put more loops in anyway, so we'll just won't bother with that this time around. Keep it nice and easy. So again, Control R, 2 loops, scale up the z-axis. Let's go 2.9 this time. Scale Z 2.9. Scale Z 2.9. There we go. That's a smooth shading, and that is literally all we need to do for the barrel. And I suppose we need to give it a bit of lip at the top and bottom. We don't need to do the top or the bottom, because from the angle that we'll be picking, they won't be viewable, so no need to model them. So let's just scale that up there a little bit, and create another loop there, so we've got a bit of a sharp edge. Let's do the same on the bottom, and now move this up to the floor. Excellent. Okay, so we need to add in a seam at the back here. So highlight that entire edge and then hit Control E and then mark seam. Now we'll bring up a little UV image editor, jump to front view, highlight everything, and then go unwrap cylinder projection. Awesome. And then you end up with that. Now, normally when you're texturing, you want to take up as much of the UV as possible, but because of the way Substance Painter works, if you start to skew the scaling, it will cause you problems later. So in this instance, we're going to waste all of this area here, which isn't particularly efficient, but it will work for what we're doing. But as a general rule, try and use up as much of the UV map as possible. But like I said, that'll do. So let's give this a material. We'll call it barrel, and that is us done for that. So let's get rid of that. Now we'll hit Shift A, Mesh, and Plane. This will be our floor, which will also extrude the walls from. Scale that up a little bit, maybe about there, maybe a little more, and then we'll highlight these two edges and extrude those up like so. How high are they actually going? 3 meters is where we want it. Yeah. Now I'm going to add in an edge loop to about there. What we're creating here basically is a little door. Or not a door, what do you call it? A gap. I did initially start out with just a square room, but it didn't look very interesting, so I thought we'd spice it up a little bit with a door there, which I might have put too high, 2.6. No, that's about right. Maybe lower that just a little bit. Okay, now we need to separate these bits up to be the floor and wall, as in separate objects. So let's go and grab that, and that. Separate by selection. Excellent. And now I'll bring that panel back so we can unwrap these. Everything has to be unwrapped. Wake up, Bill. Very like that. Let's try. Yeah, uses up a good amount of the UV. And we'll do the same here, except we don't want any painting along here or here, because that's just a waste of texture space. You won't be seeing it from the angle that we'll be picking. So get rid of that. Let's just do a smart UV unwrap on that. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so give that a material called wall, and then the floor a material called floor, and we now have our 3 export objects UV unwrapped and ready to go. We'll sort out the rest once we get back into Blender after going to Substance Painter. Only thing I want to do before doing that though is get the lighting out the way. So let's bring back our camera. Now we want to pick an angle. Let's have a look. So this is going to be our main focal sort of element that we'll be focusing in on. So I just want to bring that in a little more like that. Yeah, that should be pretty good. Yeah, so that's going to be the angle of our scene. We'll make some more adjustments to the camera once we get back, but I wanted it in the right sort of place so we know where to put our lamps. Now it's quite simple, the lighting in this. We're going to use a area lamp, which we're going to set to a size of 3, so quite a soft lighting in terms of shadows anyway, but quite bright. 700 we're going to try here, which I think is what I used. And we'll just angle that like so. And I think that'll work. Let's just have a little look from here, shall we? Yeah, it's about right. So that's the one light in. Now we'll add in a point light, which will put a bit off the scene, maybe here. Yeah, about there. And we'll set this to have a size of 1, so quite soft, at least for a point light. And we'll set the size, the energy to be 50, and we're going to give it a slight blue colour, mostly just to look interesting on the reflections. Yep, that looks good. And then we'll duplicate that one and put it kind of there, down that corridor, and that will be a red colour. Again, just to be interesting in terms of lighting. I haven't put much thought into why these colours are that. Maybe there's a fire down that way and a sky out that way. I don't know. I don't care. This looks good. So that's going to be our basic lighting setup. Let's get that saved. I've already given this a file name, but make sure you save at this point. And the next stage is to export these objects so we can use them within Substance Painter, which is the meat and potatoes of this tutorial. So barrel selected, we want the wall selected and the floor. With those three, hit File, Export, and we're going to use FBX. You can use OBJs, but I've got into the habit of always using this, so let's continue with that. Only thing you need to change from these defaults is selected objects. You could turn off applying the modifiers, but I'm going to leave that on. It's not a huge amount of geometry for Substance Painter to deal with, so it shouldn't cause any problems. Leave it at that. Export. Excellent. So that's now exported as an FBX. So at this stage, we can move on to Substance Painter. Right, now part of the reason I wanted to do this tutorial is Substance Painter has just been made available for free when used under a student license for non-commercial purposes, etc., for learning and teaching. So if you've been holding out on getting into Substance Painter, now is the time. It's a brilliant application. I'm not particularly great at it yet, but certainly good enough to pass on a bit of knowledge. So let's see how we do. I'm going to create a new file. Now you've got a lot of different workflows you can use within Substance Painter. The one that it defaults to is the metallic roughness workflow, and that's the one that we're going to focus on today. So leave that as standard at metal rough. Next you have to select the mesh that we're going to use, and we've exported one just for that purpose. There we go. Okay, we want to turn on or switch over to OpenGL normals rather than DirectX. Blender uses the OpenGL format, so always make sure that's changed, otherwise your normal directions will be wrong, which is never good. Turn on compute tangent space per fragment. I'm not sure why, if I'm honest. I've just I was reading up on the best way to use Substance Painter with Blender, and quite a few places mentioned turn that on. And this is where you select the resolution. We're going to go for the max of 4096 and hit OK, and that will bring that export into Substance Painter. There you go. Okay, so moving around a little different compared to Blender. If you hold down Alt with the left mouse button, you can rotate around. With the middle mouse button, it moves around, and then the mouse wheel to go in and out. Quite easy when you get used to it. And let's get started on actually painting stuff, shall we? Now, first thing we're going to do is the barrel. So we can focus on just that, I'm going to turn off the floor and wall. But before I do that, one thing we need to do, if you go to the texture set settings here, hit Bake Textures, make sure everything's selected. You've got output sizes here you can mess around with. We're going to leave those as standard. I think they'll be fine. And just hit Bake All Texture Sets. Now what this is going to do, it's going to create things like curvature maps, distance maps, ambient occlusion, all of the maps that the various materials are going to need to reference. It's going to bake those for us for each of the individual materials. So once that's all done, we'll hide the floor and the wall, and we'll get on to painting this barrel. And it's done. Good. And you can see here under barrel now, you've got all these different maps which have been automatically generated from the model, which these materials will make use of, which is handy. So let's get rid of the barrel. Sorry, everything but the barrel. Drag that down here, and here we go. We can start actually getting some work done. Now this layers system is very similar. If you've made textures in Photoshop before and used masks and all that sort of stuff, this is going to quickly become second nature to you. It's very, very similar. First thing I'm going to do here is get rid of that default layer, go to materials, and we're going to find a nice metal. I think there's a kind of a rusty metal material. No, am I making that up? Steel, that was it. I'm typing in metal and it's steel. And it's not smart materials, it's normal material, steel, rust. So I'm going to drag that into there, which will create a new layer, and it will add the material to our barrel there. Now for each of these materials, you have various settings under properties that you can change around. I'm not going to do much. I want the scaling to be slightly different. Let's try that at... let's begin with 5. This is just scaling the whole texture and what it's doing. Yeah, that looks quite nice. But beyond just scaling, you can also, let's, for example, rust intensity, we're going to want quite a bit of that. Maybe even more, in fact. Ooh, too much. Sometimes you have to give Substance Painter a while to catch up with changes you make as it's calculating in the background. Still maybe a little bit too much there. Yeah, not too bad. A little tiny bit lower. You've also got a separate control here for metal roughness. So if you take that down to 0, the bits that aren't rusted will go completely reflective, like so, which obviously we don't want. It's quite old metal, so take that up to about a 0.4, maybe 0.3. Yeah, looks pretty nice. So there's a sort of base metal, over the top of which we're now going to add a completely different layer of painted steel. There we go. So we'll add that in above steel rust, and it will pretty much replace the material. You can see that it's kept in some of the normal effects from the material underneath, but in general it's just completely painted over it, which is fine. Let's pick a colour. I'm going to go for the same as I did in the original, which was a just slightly off red orange sort of colour. Wait for that to catch up, darken that a bit. Yeah, that should about work. Yeah, there's not much else to change here. You can fiddle with the scaling, but given what we're about to do to this layer, it's not going to make much difference. So yeah, we'll call that done. Now this is the bit that's very like Photoshop. If I take this layer, right mouse button, and hit add a black mask, that layer is now masked. And because the entire mask is black, it means none of that layer is being used. But now we can affect this mask to bring in that layer, but only where we want it, much like we're doing Photoshop. So let's go. You've got all the various masks and smart masks. Here we are. So in fact, just up from typing in the word paint, I got quite a few, but these are all the various masks we can use. So let's take a look at that again. It's not actually what I used when I did this before recording, but it might work well, so let's give it a go. Oof, not quite. We kind of want the opposite of that, don't we? Let's have global invert. There we go. So that mask is obviously using the edge detection map, or it's probably the curvature map, to figure out where the pointy bits are and detract from there. But now we can fiddle with these settings to get closer to the result that we're after. I don't think I actually like this one. I had this problem the first time round, is I couldn't quite get the look I wanted from the masks it was using, so what I used was the older generator. So add generator, and then it was MG dripping I used, which is it's meant for doing like dripping dirt, dripping rust, stuff like that. So not really suited to paint that's chipped off, but along with the rust and everything else, I think it came up with quite a nice look, so we'll stick with it. There we go. Just play around with those numbers until you get something resembling what you're after. Yeah, that don't look too bad. Awesome. We need to bring in a bit more though, because I want a nice good orange bit in the middle, so we can put our logo in. In fact, that's a very good point. If you are using, you can have multiple layers even underneath one of these masks. So if I then go add a paint layer, I now have a paint layer on top of the generator here, so I can paint in my own. Like if I start painting here, hopefully, there you go, you get a nice big clear area. Not quite what I wanted, but you get the idea. So I'm going to do the same again. I'm just going to create an area here that's kind of extra clear, just because I want that logo on there. There we go. Maybe just maybe like that. There we go. Yeah, I think that'll do the trick for what we're doing anyway. So let's go back to the color here, because we can paint directly onto here. If I go add a paint layer, there we go. I can now draw on here and it will change the color of the thing underneath. Awesome. Now, one of the other features you've got here is the ability to draw on directly with brushes. I'm going to use this little brush here, change it to a yellowy color, like so. It's not actually that yellow, is it really? Ah, close enough. A bit too big. There we go. Bang. There we go. And there's the logo. If you've not used Substance Painter before, when you first start using it, you're just going to be shocked at the speed and ease of the majority of the workflow. It really is crazy. I love it. Almost feels like you're cheating sometimes, but I'm fine with that. Okay, so third layer here is going to be rust. At first it will cover the entire thing. We can make sure that the tiling looks good, which I think it does pretty much as is. Right mouse button and hit add a black mask, and then let's see if we can get a good smart mask of rust here. Edge rust. Let's try that. Not quite what I was after. Let's try rust drips. Oh, that's added to it. Good God. Okay. I'm going to do what I did before and hit a generator. Those smart masks, they are good, but I've not. It's mostly me, I imagine. I've just not got to grips with using them as effectively as this old generator method. There we go. Spread it a bit more. Ooh, a bit too much. That should look pretty good. Maybe change the seed. Yeah, there we go, quite like that. Okay, so 3 layers so far. The last one is going to be dirt. So, yep, select dirt, drop that in there. And this kind of has it's not so much a mask, but that's not very nice, is it? That is clearly not what I used before. Right. There we go. Go to the MG dirt generator there, which definitely works a bit nicer. We do need to affect the scaling though. Let's try 6. 8. 8 maybe. Not bad. And we want to slightly lower the amount of dirt being used there because it's going up a bit high for my liking. Let's turn down that dirt level down a bit. Maybe keep that up a bit actually. Yep, looks pretty good. Only niggle I have is we've got loads of dirt down the bottom here, but then this rim hasn't got any dirt on it, which it just doesn't look right to me. So let's add in another paint layer on this mask, and we'll just paint in that area manually, and that will add in the dirt there. And then already in very little time at all we have a fully, oh my god, I'm breaking things. What are you doing, Bill? There we go. We have a fully textured object, which would I can't imagine doing the same amount of work in something like Photoshop as quickly. Maybe some people could, but I certainly couldn't. Anyway, let's bring up the floor and the wall now, since we have one item pretty much painted. You'll notice that back faces don't get rendered, which is why you're getting that funny sort of look on the barrel there. Don't worry about that, that's just Substance Painter. Next thing we'll do is have a look at the floor. Let's type in concrete, see if they've got anything along that line. Yeah, that's pretty good. Drop that in. Give it a minute to think about it. And we have a basic sort of concrete looking floor. You can adjust the scaling if you wish, but I think that will be fine as is. And the only thing we're going to add to these is dirt. It was the barrel that was the complicated one. So let's drop that. Get in there. Thank you. Drop that in there. Wait for it to catch up. Like so. Grab the mask editor and change the generator to MG Dirt, which works a lot nicer. Maybe a bit more grunge. Ooh, a bit less grunge. Excellent. And we will actually, if it lets me, I'm going to copy that layer, paste that into the walls layer as well. So we have the same dirt settings for the wall. Excellent. Now we just need a base material. Maybe I haven't got anything like that. Some sort of plaster maybe. No, I do have in my material library, but I can't be asked to find that right now. Trying to keep times down. So I use a clean concrete. There we go. That looks pretty good. I'm going to tone down the dirt on the walls just a little bit, because that's, again, higher than I would like. Yeah, that's pretty good. And that is pretty much it for Texture Painter. The rest we'll be doing in Blender. So, all we need to do now is export all of these out, all of the textures that this is generating. So let's go File, Export Textures. It's got our separate material sets all selected, barrel, floor and wall. We just need to find a location. So I'll save it with the rest of my rest of the stuff to do with this tutorial, if I can find it. There we go. Too many things to click on. So with that selected, basically just hit export. Now there's a lot you can do to configure the outputs, but I wanted to keep this tutorial relatively simple, so I based the workflow around its default settings, which is a metallic roughness workflow, which is going to work fine for us anyway. So let's hit export. Now while that's going, just in case you haven't been following exactly what Substance Painter does, the reason it is so powerful is throughout that entire time that I was working on the materials, I wasn't just working on the colour. It was also adding in bump maps, it was adding in roughness maps, it was adding in metallic maps. Everything that's going to be needed for the PBR workflow that we'll then use in cycles, it was handling in the background, just but from a user point of view, it's just like you're painting on the material. But in the background, it's handling all those maps separately, and it's what makes Substance Painter and Substance Designer so powerful, because it allows you to, as an artist, work directly without having to think about those maps so much, which is brilliant in my mind. Anyway, this is going to take quite a bit of time to export by the looks of it, so I shall... Right, with Substance Painter finally finished exporting, we now have all of the textures saved away and ready to work with. So, I'm going to jump over to my normal nodes view, which you would have seen before by now, and let's jump into rendered mode down here. Awesome, so we have our basic scene set up. Now, we are going to be duplicating this barrel and moving about all over the place, but let's get the materials in there first, and then we can position where we want secondary barrels to go, secondary elements. Anyway, Bill, you're chatting rubbish. So let's start off with the barrel. Got that selected. Now, throughout this, I'm going to be using the SP to Blend node group, which is a product I have up for sale on Blender Market. However, I don't agree with doing a tutorial which forces you to then go out and buy a paid project. If you want to buy SP to Blend, brilliant. But I'm going to quickly show you a method of bringing in those texture maps and making a node setup for yourself, and then you can decide where to go from there. So let's leave that up the top for a moment. What we want to do first of all is bring in those maps. So I'm going to hit Shift A, Texture, Multiple Images. Now I think that might be a feature of Node Wrangler, maybe not. If you don't see multiple images, turn on Node Wrangler, which is a built-in add-on, and that will fix the problem. Now if I go to my textures folder and let these all load up for a second, you can see all of these maps that Substance Painter has generated for us, which is everything we're going to need to then put our scene together. However, we don't need all of them. Let's take the barrel for example. We're going to need the base color. We won't need the height or the normal, because the normal underscore OpenGL incorporates the normal and the height map together. So we're going to use that. We'll need the metallic map. The mixed ambient occlusion is optional, but I'll grab it, and also the roughness map. So base color, metallic, mixed AO, normal underscore OpenGL, and roughness, and that will be the same in every one. So open those up. Next, before we forget, we have to change all but the base color to use non-color data. Non-color data, there you go. Now the reason for that is Blender, and this is something I've only learned relatively recent, Blender will automatically apply gamma correction unless told otherwise, which is great when you're using the color textures, because that allows us for a nice easy non-linear workflow, or linear workflow. It allows us to to not have to worry about the gamma, which is a problem I see it with V-Ray all the time. Blender does it all for you, but the downside is it will apply those gamma corrections to maps where we wouldn't want it to, and that's why we have to mark for non-color data. So once you have those maps in place, let's just dump the diffuse, for example, the base color into the diffuse, and you can see there's our texture. Now, to do a really basic PBR setup, and I'm talking real basic here, we need a diffuse shader, a glossy shader, a mix, there we go, and a Fresnel, there we go, excellent. And I like to be able to preview what we're doing. There's the Fresnel, diffuse, glossy, mix. Excellent. Okay, in this case we also want to, no we don't, we'll grab that as a second glossy, because this glossy may well be coloured, because it's going to be our metal glossy, so we'll also drop the colour into there. We'll then grab a mix shader, like so, connect that into there, and then the metallic map we can drop into the mix shader. So what that is in actual fact doing is using this metallic map, where am I? There we go. So it's using this metallic map to decide whether to use our diffuse, glossy, Fresnel setup there, or this separate glossy shader, i.e. metallic, and that's being driven by the metallic map there. Hopefully not too complicated, but yeah, that is what that's doing. I'm having trouble talking apparently. Okay, so next is the mixed ambient occlusion. I won't include that in this basic setup because it's confusing enough as it is. We will obviously need the normal map, so let's go grab a vector normal map. There we go. Drop the normal into there, and then you want to feed this to everything: the Fresnel, the diffuse, that glossy, and that glossy. Boom. So that's our bump map in place, and now it's just the roughness value. Now, because of the way Blender works, its roughness settings don't tie in well with Substance Painter's particularly well, but you can fix that by adding in a math node, changing it to power, and then change that bottom value to 2, and then drop the roughness into there. So the roughness to the power of 2 basically is what we're going to use for roughness, and that goes everywhere that it needs to as well. So both of those and those. So with that really basic setup, you will get relatively decent results from the maps that are coming out of Substance Painter. If you're after something a bit more complex and in depth, then you could either use this SP to blend that I'm going to be using throughout the rest of the tutorial, or grab either my PBR nodes for free off my website and do a metallic mix between those, or make your own based off Andrew Price's tutorial, whatever you want to do. You've got plenty of options there. I just wanted to show you a quick manual way of doing it, so you weren't being forced to go down the route that I'll be using. Anyway, with that said, let's get rid of all these nodes because I don't want to use them today. I'm going to be dropping these into my node group here, like so. Connect that up like so, and bam, that's that done. One of the benefits of the node group I use here is you can quickly preview what's going on with the map. So that's like the roughness setting, that's our metallic setting, ambient occlusion. If I was using it, I'd bring that in like so, and then you've got your dielectric gloss and the metallic rim shading, of which there is none by the looks of it. Oh, it's because it's off. So we could use a bit of metallic rim. Let's go for it. Use a bit of rim lighting. I doubt it will be that obvious in the render, but certainly won't cause any harm. Anyway, now I can see that, I want to rotate this barrel around a little so the logo is kind of there. Excellent. Okay, so just need to quickly bring in those other materials and get that all working right. So repeat the process: floor, base color, metallic, ambient occlusion, OpenGL normals and roughness. Change those to non-color data like so. Excellent, and drop them in like so. This won't have any metallics, so I won't mess around with the room lighting on that. But that is the floor nicely in place. That's certainly not the texture I used on the first go round at this, but it won't make much of a difference. Anyway, add the wall in now, like so. Floor. Why is it the wall? I'm doing the wall now, aren't I? Wake up, man. Change those to non-color data. I was actually thinking it might be worth adding the gamma correction into this node group, because if you're going to be using Substance Painter a lot and you've got to drag in these textures all the time, it really does get annoying having to change everything over to non-color data. So I was considering building in the gamma correction into that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the subject? Anyway, bam, that's all our textures in place already, looking quite good. we're going to be doing quite a bit more before we're done, but it certainly is looking nice. Now, one of the key things to point out that I didn't mention while I was in Substance Painter, because I forgot, is even outside of the separate groups. Now, we had barrel, wall and floor groups, but even outside of those, it will look at objects that are nearby and use those in the calculations. For example, you can see now I've placed this barrel down here, the floor's got extra dirt around where the barrel would be, and the walls and the floor know where they're meeting, and the dirt's being added there in a realistic way, which is awesome and time saving. I love it. Now, if you're going to do it properly, like if this wasn't a still from a specific angle, you'd want all of the extra barrels already in the scene, probably with their own UV maps, so they can all get slightly different textures. I don't know, but certainly for what we're doing, just duplicating the barrels fine. In fact, we're not going to duplicate, we're going to reference. We're going to use Alt-D and make some copies of the barrel now. So, let's I don't know, a couple of those. You want a couple in this doorway. Yeah, something like that. We just want lots of barrels, basically. Get rid of that one. And put it there. And get that one, put it there. Yeah, that was pretty good, and it should catch our lights quite nicely. Yep, not looking too shabby at all. I think I had one more that was kind of fallen over. No, behave. Thank you. There we go. I think I had that kind of that sort of angle. Awesome, not bad. Now, only thing left to do, obviously all these logos are pointing in the exact same way, which looks a bit like rubbish, doesn't it? So let's just do some random rotating around the Z-axis to fix that. Doesn't matter if some of them are showing, just so it doesn't look all identical, really. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so we now have our barrels in place. At this stage, to make things a little easier, I'm going to grab all the barrels, select linked object data, there we go, and move those to layer 2. So we're just going to be looking at our floor and wall for a little while, because we're not quite done there. Now, what we're going to do next is add in some wetness to the floor. We don't want it to be a complete dry floor, we want some wetness on there, mainly because I thought it looked cool. More than anything else. It's probably something we could have thought about beforehand and done in Substance Painter and generate a map for it, but I found this way a lot easier and simpler to follow, so let's do that. I'm going to add in a glossy shader, and for now just look just at the glossy shader. There we go. Turn the roughness way down, 0.01. Yeah, that'll probably work quite well. And at this stage I'm going to also bring in another image texture. This one I'll make available for download, and it is Puddle Splash Normal, which I'm going to, if you're using Node Wrangler with an image selected, you can press Ctrl T and that will bring up the texture coordinate and mapping nodes, which is always handy. I'm going to use generated coordinates rather than the UV for this. And let's just see what it's doing first of all. Drop that in there. We'll need to change that to box because we're using generated. And I just want to see what's going on. So these are basically going to be like the little splashes in the puddle, as it were. So let's up the scale. Maybe a bit too much there. Yeah, that should work about right. Just but obviously we don't want that plugged into the color because that is a normal. So let's add in a normal map. Make sure the image is set to non-color data. Drop it in there, drop it in the glossy, and that starts to give us that sort of effect, which is well stronger than we need. So let's change that to a 0.1. And then, yeah, so now if you were looking at that, it's kind of got that distorted, puddly sort of look to it, which is exactly what we want. And now we just need to find a way to mix these two together in a cool looking way. So let's add in a mix shader, drag the glossy into the bottom value, and now we're going to create a mask basically, where black will be the floor and white will be the water that we've just made. So let's go to a noise texture. I think noise will work for us here. Hit Control Shift and left click to preview it. Again, need Node Wrangler for that. And start to get the scale right. So nope, don't like that. Don't really like that either. Maybe. We'll need to put in a color ramp to get more control of this. So bring that up a little bit, bring that down some. So we just remember that the black areas are going to be 100% floor and the white areas are going to be water. I brought the barrels back in so I can see what I'm doing basically. Yeah, it might look quite good. I don't know. Let's try that, shall we? So now let's hit the mix shader, drop that in there. Ooh, not bad at all. So a little bit more fiddling. I want the water to be a bit more noticeable, especially here. And the black to fade out a bit more. In fact, if I grab that, then bring that one down as well. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, let's try that. You could obviously spend some more time giving that some TLC to look exactly the way you want it to, but I don't think that is too bad. Let's try that. There we go. Yeah, we'll call that done anyway. So that gives us a nice sort of wet looking floor, which just creates a much nicer looking result because the floor then becomes almost mirror-like reflective, which gives you something interesting to look at rather than flat space, and it just balances out the image nicely, in my opinion. Anyway, so with the floor done, we're almost there now. What we're going to do though is add in, if I go back to the original image, which I'll magically overlay with editing, you'll see that there's kind of a sort of smoky look to this, and that we're going to fake now. We're not using a smoke simulator or anything like that. I'm going to use a technique I picked up from Gleb Alexandrov actually, which works really well. So let's go File, Import, it's Images as Planes, which is an add-on, isn't it? So Images as Planes, thank you. And now I can go back to my textures, and I have a couple again that I'll be sharing. Let's have a look at Smoke 1 to begin with. Excellent. I need to grab that up there, rotate it into place and size a bit. Yeah, that should look pretty well. And this is going to be kind of our backdrop smoke in the background. Really notice exactly what it's doing. Yeah, that should work pretty well for us. Awesome. Let's get rid of the barrels. In fact, I'm going to put this to a new layer for a start, but also get rid of the barrels. Go back to rendered mode, And this will display where our smoke's going to be. That's actually going to work pretty well. Good. So let's grab that, create another one here, maybe about there. Smoky. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad at all. And maybe a third one. Let's see where our barrels are. So maybe about like that, perhaps. Yep, that should be nice. Right, now we have three materials now called smoke 1. Now obviously that's way too much smoke, so what we're going to do for a start, I'm not going to use it as part of the diffuse colour, just going to use a white diffuse shader for this. The other shader we're going to need is a transparent one, and then I'm going to use a mix shader, attach a colour ramp to the image, and that will allow us to decide on the transparency. So texture, no, converter, get it together, Bill. So there's our colour ramp. Drop that. Oh, you're starting to bug me now, Blender. There we go. And by Blender I mean me. Anyway, drop that into the mix shader, but let's have a look exactly what we're doing there. So we want a bit more transparency there. Probably want to bring this down a little bit so none of it's completely opaque. That has not worked as intended. So fully white would be transparent. Yes. And that is odd. Right, getting there. I think I'm just getting myself a bit backwards here, isn't it? So the white areas are going to be transparent, and I was being stupid. Ignore me. What we actually want is for it practically all to be white, like that. So just a slight light grey there, fully white on that side, and then yeah, there we start to get the smoke effect that we're after. Probably make that even more subtle, like so. And then you can choose whether you want to actually use the colour from the image or not. In some cases you might. I just found that looked a bit more kind of grim. You probably have to manually adjust by bringing that down. But overall I didn't really like it, so I'm going to leave that as white and just leave that up there. Okay. So that adds in some smoky sort of effect to our scene. Now in my one I also added in another layer, and I will include the texture for it, just a bit of sort of close-up wispy smoke here, but it's exactly the same workflow, so you get the idea. So we can now move on to render settings, because we are going to do a little bit of compositing, which means we need to render. So I've got my resolution set to 1080p. Sampling I'm going to use just for this 500. In my final render I did 1500, which is a bit high. I think with all the transparent bounces it was causing a bit of noise. I don't normally do 1500 these days, but yeah, 500 for now. Clamp direct at 4 with indirect at 1. That's to cut down on noise. It's kind of the default settings I use. Sometimes I need to adjust from those, but for this it worked fine. Light paths, let's have 32 bounces with transmission and glossy at 16 and 32. Don't need any volume. Transparency at 32 because there's a lot of transparent bounces going on. And I've also got filter glossy at 1. Again, just to help cut down on noise. Tile size wise, I use auto tile size. Set to 256 by 256 where possible, though it will adjust it where needed. But if you're not using a that mod, just go for 256 by 256, that'll be fine. And we're good to render, I think. Oh no, a few more settings. Wake up, Bill. So we're going to use a little bit of depth of field. So let's turn the limits on and set the distance to be the first barrel. So the focal point will kind of be that logo on the barrel. There we go. And we don't want much of an effect, just something subtle. So if I go to rendered mode again and change the radius to, let's try 0.01. Just slightly starts to blur the background. Yeah, I think that's going to be enough. Really don't think we'll need more than that. Yeah, that's what I'll do for that. I think that's it. Oh, now another thing I like to do lately anyway, if I can find it. I have lost it again. Color management, there we go. So you have quite a lot you can do with color management. I've not really gone into a huge amount of depth with my research on what all these things do, but you can choose various film types here. But one thing I'm going to change under view is change from the default film, which gives kind of a darker, grungier sort of look to. Grungy's not the word I'm after. A higher contrast sort of look, and then just up the exposure a little bit. So 8. Yeah. I think it gives a really nice sort of look. We'll be able to get the brightness levels exactly where we want in post-processing anyway, but I think that's good enough for a render. So make sure my smoke layer's back, save, always like to save, and now we'll hit render and I'll pause until it's done. Right, as I was hitting render I realised I had forgotten something which isn't massively important in this particular case, because we're primarily using sort of traditional lighting rather than using a HDR. However, since there is quite a bit of metal showing through, we really should do something about the reflections. There's nothing for the metal to reflect other than these two light sources, which isn't really ideal. So under our node view again, I'll demonstrate what I'm talking about by turning off the barrels and the smoke, and I'll add in a quick UV sphere, scale it down a bit, there we go, set that to smooth, and I'm going to give that a quick glossy material just so we can see what we're doing. There we go. So this gives you the problem, as it were. That is what the scene is currently. From that position, that's the reflections we're getting, which isn't particularly interesting. And if there was some more metal showing, or if the metal was cleaner, you'd really notice it. So let's go over to our world settings, and I'm going to bring in a texture. Now this is the only texture I won't be able to share because it is a commercial one, but any similar HDR will do fine, as long as I can find the stupid, there it is. And I've got this HDR here, which should work quite well. I've done it as a image texture. I want an environment texture. Wake up, Bill. There we go. Boom. So yeah, just dropping that in, looking at our little sphere there, there's now a lot more for the metal to be able to catch. What we don't want to do really is have this affect our lighting. It slows down rendering for a start, and also we've already got sufficient lighting for our scene. So if you add in a light path and then add in, let's just use the reflection ray, and for a moment I'll turn off our lighting, which I'm going to move to its own layer. and then you can see what's going on. So with the with that left as normal, if I increase this to say 2, we're getting quite a bit of lighting there just from the HDR, which we don't want. So let's go and add in a math node, so we've got control over what we're doing here. 2 to match what we've got there. Drop that into our strength, and now it's only affecting the reflections. You can go even further and tell it just to look at the glossy, and then it will only bounce off the glossy. In fact, that's the one we're going to use because I think that'll work quite nicely. You can see our glossy shader here is catching the light perfectly, but it's barely affecting the rest of our scene, which is in darkness, until we bring back the lighting, and then it all looks nice and normal. Perfect. So we'll use that setup. Cool. So with that done, I'll now hit render again, and that will be that. Let me just get rid of that annoying sphere. There we go. Okay, so let's hit render again, and hopefully I won't have to pause and redo anything. Right, and after 15 minutes, the render is done. Still looking a little bit on the noisy side, but yeah, I was expecting that anyway. But it's good enough to work on some compositing, so that's what we're going to do now. So let's go to the compositing thing, turn on use nodes and backdrop, bring that down, Control Shift click on render layers, that'll add in a viewer node, and we can see what we're doing. Just going to zoom that down a little so we can fit it on our screen. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so we're not going to do a few things. We're going to put in a little bit of bloom glow on some of the brighter areas, do a bit of color balancing, lens distortion, add in a vignette, and that's about it. Oh, and sharpen it up a little bit. So let's start with that. Filter, set the filter to sharpen, and if I drop that in, you'll see what that does. On its default setting of 1, it's a little too extreme. So let's try 0.1. Yeah, it just sharpens up that nicely. Next we will, let's try and get away with just using a glare node, because it's so much easier than trying to use a bunch of blur nodes. So if you turn the mix up to 1, you only see the result of the glare. Let's turn the threshold to 0, that will glare everything. And we want fog glow. Yeah, I don't think this is going to cut it, is it? Okay, we'll do it the less fun way. Filter, blur, and we also need a color. RGB curves, here we go. Drop that in there, and let's see what we can get. We just want the brightest sort of areas to poke through. Just the bits that are catching the light on the barrel mostly. Yeah, let's try that. Add in this blur node, set fast Gaussian. Let's try 0.5. There we go. Maybe also try 1.5. And then maybe also try 3. Yeah, that'll work quite well. Now let's get a color mix, set it to add, and combine all these effects. I'm sure I saw in a tutorial recently a quicker way of doing this, like to get the same result but without using all these different nodes, and I can't for the life of me remember what it is. So apologies there. And then we're adding a final add node, which will come from our sharpen, and it will add in the glow effect. So that's it off. Maybe give this about 0.2, maybe 0.3. Yeah, that's nice. It brightens up the image a little bit and sort of draws your eyes to these areas where the light's being caught. I like it. Anyway, next up is a color balance. Let's drop that in. Now, typically the way I do color balancing is probably completely wrong, but it's how I do it. I'll start with a mid-tone in one direction, let's say green, and then the highlight in the other direction, usually a little less, like so. And now if you move the highlight either up or down the hue by sort of 10 degrees or so, you can get some really nice effects, like let's say that. Got a nice sort of greeny blue moody sort of look there, possibly a bit too green, so let's ease that in a bit. A little bluer on the highlights. Yeah, I like that. It's got kind of a gloomy, depressing sort of feel to it, which is nice. Now, the vignette. We're going to do two things with the vignette. We're going to darken but also blur the edges. So first thing we need is this mask, because this mask will 0.7, no, 0.6, no, 0.58. I never remember this. 565 works pretty well. Maybe just 5.6. 5.625. Yeah, whatever. And then width 1. What this will do, if I click on that now, is it gives us a nice masking for our vignette. Next, we can add in the blur. Probably 30%, quite a nice gentle one, a bit too gentle. 25, that'd be nice. Now, if I add in a blur node, grab this chap and click on there, this will then blur the entire image. Let's try 5%. Yeah, so that blurs the entire image, and then I actually might be able to get away with dumping that in there. That's cool. But no, it's not. That's still blurring everything. Anyway, wake up, man. Okay, so we'll use a color mix. So we're taking in the default color, well, not the default, the color from there, and the blur amount will be our factor, and then the blurred image will be that. And that's the opposite of what we want. So swap those over. Bam. And now it's blurring where the vignette takes place, as well as we're also going to darken it. That's a little too extreme actually, but we'll see how it looks. So let's add another color mix, set this one to multiply, and we'll multiply that by the value of the blur node, and that also darkens the edges. But we want to lower the effect there a bit, maybe a 0.4. Compare it to 0. It's a little too harsh. Maybe change that to 20% rather than. Yeah. Sometimes it's just a matter of fiddling around until you get a look you like. But yeah, that's working pretty well. Only other thing I want to do is add in a lens distortion, which I have lost. There we go. So we'll drop that in there, which also connects to there. But we'll just have a look up to that point, get rid of the vignette for now. Change that to fit and try, I don't know, 0.01 maybe? 0.075. No, 0.0075. Yeah, just a slight effect there. Maybe the ever so slightest amount of that as well. God. Yeah, but that'll work pretty well. Let's connect that back up to that. And there is our finished, rather depressing, gloomy barrel scene. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I've certainly enjoyed making it. Substance Painter is a great program. I strongly recommend you give it a try. It's now free to download for non-commercial purposes, so you'll be able to have a lot of fun with it. If you have any requests for future tutorials or comments on this one, or want to show some of your artwork, dump it in the comments below. I tend to reply quite quickly. For now though, that is it, and I shall speak to you next time.